Hello and welcome everyone to the GO.live Gaming Podcast on the 23rd of August 2018. I'm your main host on this show and my name is Christian, also known as The Sag. With me today I have more people than I did last time. Last time it was only me and James, but today I also have Josh, also known as Chromatism.
Hello, yes, I'm back again. Finally.
Finally.
Actually. It's been like 2 or 3 podcasts now that I've somehow managed to miss.
Yeah, it feels like me and James have been quite alone the last couple of times, so...
We've been keeping each other warm and comfortable.
Yeah, sort of. And we also have, it does say Josh Chromatism on stream, just shouldn't be there. I thought I fixed that, but we do have Patrick, also known as Raker. Hey, man.
No, I now identify as Josh.
Oh God, I've multiplied. What
Yeah,
the hell?
2 Joshes on the stream. That's just going to be confusing. That's not good,
That
man.
happens
That's
sometimes.
not good, man.
Spontaneous multiplication.
No, I think my hiatus was about the same or even longer than Josh's.
Yeah, probably. I guess what you were doing on your hiatus was adapting yourself to become more like Josh.
Yeah, sure.
I don't need that. It's fine.
All right. So we also have Drainus, also known as James. Thank you for being back this time.
Hello,
around as well.
everybody. Josh, Patrick, nice to have you back, boys.
Thank you. Nice
Sarge,
to see you again.
As always, it's a pleasure.
Yeah. All right. So today we're going to talk about Anthem again, sort of an interview about Anthem. There's not too much new about the game. We're still waiting on more interesting stuff. I was honestly hoping that we're going to get more stuff from Gamescom, but that was, not really what I hoped it out to be. There was one interview, but it basically was a rehashing of all the other interviews that we've seen so far of the game, so... Yeah. But we're going to talk about that nonetheless. Before I go to the actual part of the meaty part of the show, I'm just going to say that we're currently live on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, and Mixer. And if you don't have time to stay with us the entire show, then you're more than welcome to watch the VOD after this, or you can listen to the podcast on audio form. On and in audio form on your favorite podcast app of choice, on iTunes, on SoundCloud, on Stitcher, and basically everywhere you get your podcast. Also, if you enjoy the show, then please do what us older gamers do. Send an email. We would like an email. It's always fun with emails, I think.
I prefer carrier pigeon.
Yeah, and we can probably
Telegram.
we can probably set our own Guns of Anthem carrier pigeon, or should we go Harry Potter style and go with owls instead?
And I see. I would have a vote for owls, but having a mecha javelin owl, no, yes, please, that'd be great.
Mecha owl, yeah.
I for one welcome on you, overlords.
I am for snail mail.
Yeah, sure. We can send postcards.
Actually get a man to run across the country with your letter.
Yeah.
I've got it!
Message
Throw your
sir.
messages in the ocean.
Yeah. Please don't do that. Please don't run cross country with emails to us. That's just creepy. Don't do that. Thank you.
Where you are, you might get a bit wet as well, to be fair. I mean, there could be a body of water in the way.
Yeah. We have quite a lot of rain here as well, so I think we've got basically the same weather here as you guys have. It's not really the polar opposite of what we had before with the heat, but it's something different.
It's the British summer doing what the British summer does.
Yeah.
Everybody's off work. Excellent. Have some clouds, have some rain, have some general misery. Stop getting above your station. You're not in Ibiza.
Yes, we don't have a
Exactly.
climate, we just have cynical, sarcastic weather.
Get real, people. This isn't Mallorca. This is Blackpool.
Is that where the British humor actually stems from? The weather.
Oh, probably. I wouldn't
Yeah,
be
pretty
surprised.
much.
But it's great. I mean, it changes so often that in those awkward moments where you accidentally make eye contact with somebody on the street, you've always got something different to talk about. Apart from the last few weeks of hell, where it's been nothing but a heatwave. What can you do then? Nothing. You know?
Yeah.
It gets to a point where even the British are bored about talking about the weather.
It's true. That just doesn't happen.
No, not in Sweden. Like what you talk about with people at work is with the weather. After you talked about the weather, you have nothing.
You have awkward silence.
Yeah,
Hmm.
you can say like, oh, well, my kid's got a cold. Yeah, that's about it.
Well, that must be the weather.
Yeah, it's probably the weather.
Awful.
Yeah. All right. So what we're going to talk about today is a interview on metro.cu.uk about Anthem. It was kind of an interesting interview, a little bit of a different spin from what we've seen the other interviewers doing so far. Not entirely sure there's something that new, but he was pushing a little bit on different subjects in a different way, which sort of shines light on things that I don't think we have had a straight up answer before, which I kind of liked. So let's see what we're gonna start with here. One thing that he mentioned that I actually hadn't thought about is the 3D movement in Anthem. Apparently that is something that game developers have always been quite wary about actually doing, because it's not that easy. It's easier to just do the normal way where you walk on ground, and the 3D movement and having more axes to move around on, vertical and horizontal and up and down and all of that, apparently takes quite a lot of time to nail if you want to do it right. So they talk about that, and basically they say, yeah, it was a struggle for us as well. It took a lot of time before we got it where we are now, because they also didn't want to make it feel too complex, which I feel like if you are making sort of a flight sim, it's probably easier in that sense just to try to mimic real world physics and mechanics on how flying works. But when you are making a game that's going to feel more arcadey and cater to a lot more people, then you need to make it feel a lot easier. And that's something that apparently they've got quite spot on. From what I've seen, it's been really easy for a lot of people just to pick up a controller and start flying around. And yeah, so okay, yeah, I'm for one, I'm really positive that the control scheme actually feels quite solid already.
Yeah. I think it's an element of game design, just in general, that a lot of people only think about when it's not good. You know, it's one of those things that you take for granted until it's not good, and it's like, oh dear. And I can't remember, I have no idea who was the first video game developer to say it. I really don't know. But when in video games, it's a truism is that it's not about, you know, the feeling of what happens when you shoot something, the feeling of what happens when you, I don't know, kick or punch or do whatever it is the mechanic of the game's got to do, even if it's just dropping blocks down a screen a la Tetris. Its movement in a video game is power. If the movement feels good, it feels good to play. I mean, sure, you need the other bits to be good as well, but that is your basis for that game. You know, if it's got any movement involved at all, it needs to be good.
Yeah, it really does. This really helps with the suspension of disbelief, which is really important in movies and in games. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically that you need to believe that the things that are possible in this world are actually possible. Like, you can't think all the time, okay, this doesn't feel right, this shouldn't be possible. Like, you need to be able to get immersed in that and actually feel like that could be a possible thing that happens.
As anyone who's played GTA 5 will testify, if your movement controls are crap, then you're going to get frustrated and disenfranchised with it.
Yeah.
But it's excellent to know that they've got that fundamental block down anyway.
Yeah, certainly.
Don't get the fundamentals right, you're never going to fly, are you?
No, you aren't.
Pun not actually intended there.
I mean, if you don't feel like an Iron Man crossed with the Terminator, then you're not in the Javelin, quite clearly.
Yeah. Yeah, but that is also an interesting point. I'm listening to a podcast called Butterscotch Shenanigans, and they recently talked about, in the last podcast episode, about movement and controls and implementing that into a actual video game. And it's a lot different than you might think. You might think that you want to make it look You want to mimic reality as much as possible, and that's actually been an issue with the screen or screen motion capture technology, that actual human movement doesn't necessarily need to look that natural in an actual game. So you also actually need to tweak that to become a little bit more flexible and all of that. It's something that you can see it's done very well in games like Overwatch, for example, or animated shorts or animated movies. They always exaggerate, and those people look sort of like humans and move sort of like humans, but they always are a bit of an exaggeration of actual human movement in terms of...
Does that sort of overcome the idea of the uncanny valley effect a bit, perhaps?
Yeah. I think it's a compensation for that. It's just our brains sort of interpret that in a totally different way. So it makes more sense for us, apparently, for some reason, when it's a little bit more exaggerated, when it looks a little bit more spaced out. I don't know.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's the movement. And let's see. So, one thing that has been a reoccurring thing about Anthem is that everybody says, okay, so this is Bioware or EA's take on the Destiny approach of a game. It's going to be a Destiny clone and blah, blah, blah. And we've talked about that. Yeah, it's probably more towards Warframe. That's something we've talked about before. But he's sort of debunking the idea of making a Destiny clone here even more. So, the question goes as follows. Did you actively set out to create your own spin on Destiny? Or did the flying mechanic come first, or just the multiplayer aspect in general? The idea what we wanted to create came first. When we started concepting Anthem, Destiny, and The Division, these types of games hadn't even been released. So Destiny and those games weren't even a thing when they started development on Destiny.
I disagree. Monster Hunter has been out for years, but do carry on.
Yeah. There's no obvious inspiration there, but when we're talking about Destiny, like Monster Hunter, I guess you can sort of compare Monster Hunter more towards Warframe than Destiny, even if the comparisons are a little bit weird
It
to make.
It is a looter of some description, let's put it that
way. Yeah. So he continues, really? They hadn't been talked about yet. This was 5.5 years ago. And so we thought, look, we know we want to build a social experience. We know we want it to be an open world that would have a higher degree of freedom and mobility. And we started building it from there. Knowing that that was the experience we wanted, we then decided what kind of setting would be most appropriate for it. And then we started layering down a story and characters on top of that. So the one thing that you also can take from here is that when they wanted to make the game, they first and foremost wanted to make a open world with a high degree of freedom and mobility. So sort of the movement system and the world was the first key point that they're building away from, or using as a ground to work up from, which I wouldn't guess necessarily have been the case for Bioware games in the past. So, just an interesting
But you can't
point,
deny that throughout a game's development, the developers will take inspiration from what else is out there.
Oh yeah.
And we'll look at examples of what's doing well. If they've got a mechanic in the game that's similar to a mechanic that's recently come out and has been absolutely slammed, they're not going to keep it.
No,
or at least not going to keep it in that state, are they? So
yeah.
there's going to be a level of, we thought about Anthem first. This was our baby first. We got there first. Mixed with, you released that game first, and that bit did really well. So we want some of that.
Yeah, but the thing is also is something that we're talking about in this interview is that for some reason it's not an uncommon thing that developers start developing almost the same kind of game at the same time. Because let's be real, if if you take like the hype with Battle Royale, one of the things that is really hard is when PUBG was already out, people want to start making clones of PUBG, but developing a game like that actually takes years. So that's an issue that you can't really make as good competitor as you want to in that short of time to make it actually matter that much. You basically need to have a project that already is you're able to adapt to that format in order to get on that craze. Because if you start development when that craze is on its high spike, then you're probably gonna miss it when the game is actually released or when the game is out.
To be fair, I do agree with you. Sorry, were you about to say something, James? Or you?
No, not really.
So I agree. I don't know. I think there are all manner of things that come into play at times like this, and I think it's easy to forget that nearly everything, the actual moments of true innovation when it comes to the history of human society as a whole, not just in video games, the fact that those moments are historically recorded and so easy to bring to mind should tell you just how amazing it is that those moments happen. And in gaming, we do have stuff like that. I mean, I still remember Super Mario Brothers on the NES, and then we get Super Mario 64, which was kind of the defining moment in 3D platforming that other games took cues from. It wasn't the first 3D platformer, but it was the first one that got it right.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about what you were saying then about when it seems like so many people come up with a project at the same time. And I think, I think there comes a point where some of the best things that come out, and they might not be the most remembered things, but some of the best things that come out are things that are innovation. Sure, there's some new ideas in there, but it's innovation. And I think, to use the Battle Royale as an example, I mean, we had some interesting stuff on Arma 2. Was it Arma 2 or Arma 3? It was Arma 2, where we had the original sort of Battle Royale mod, and that was sort of based around, some novels and whatnot, and Battle Royale, for crying out loud. And then we had Rust and so many other games. So, PUBG didn't come out of nowhere. There was stuff before it, and I think when it comes to stuff like Destiny, we've had basically we came through a period of Diablo and action RPGs, very heavily loot-based hack and slashers, and then we got into MMOs, which MMO did that right. That was wow. Why? Well, loot and progress and everything else. I think it was. I think the signs were there that people were going to want to make a shooter. I mean, we had PlanetSide to begin with, but that was a straight-up shooter. That didn't have the MMO elements, and that's the stuff that really hooks people in. So I think, I think it is amazing when new projects come out at the same time. But I think there's also something to be said for the fact that we just have some really clever people innovating on what they're seeing in the industry, and that thing is probably going to go in a pretty similar direction, here and there.
Yeah.
That's
all I got to say. I don't know if there's a point behind that, but that was all I had to say.
Well, I think the point behind that is basically that, as you were saying, that at the point of concept of Anthem, at the concept of Destiny, the concept of The Division, that all may have actually happened at a fairly similar time point, and then the natural progression of those titles through the development phase has led them to the release dates that we've seen.
Yeah.
And the associations that people make between them.
That's right. Thank you for finishing my point. I appreciate that. That was good.
Yeah, there was one question I had. They said 5 years ago Destiny wasn't even talked about. When did the first game even come out?
We can probably check that out.
Roughly.
Google.
Yeah,
yep,
Google is your friend.
As everybody furiously types.
The first game was released 2014. Yeah, so
August 23rd, it went gold.
Yeah, so basically 1.5 years after development started on Anthem, Destiny was released.
I thought it was older. Never mind then.
No,
yeah, I get that feeling all the time.
When? Just out of interest, when was Warframe? When was that released? Well, I say released, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Oh, 25th of March 2013. That came first. Good God.
Oh. That is a game that has developed or evolved.
Evolved
immensely since release as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right, so I guess we can continue here. Of course, they need to address the Battlefront 2 debacle, so it goes as follows. But one of the industry-wide events that affected everyone is Battlefront 2. And it did seem as if things went very quiet with Anthem a few months after it was announced, as if some sort of development crisis or rethink had occurred. And again, there's no shame if you reacted to Battlefront 2's backlash in the way I'm implying. If you did, I'm glad you did. Yavy laughs. Although I suppose you can just claim, oh, we were never going to be evil. We chose not to be evil before even being evil was a thing. And his replies goes as follows. We were cool even before that. No, I'll be super honest with you. And I think you can see this in our previous products. Like Mass Effect 3 multiplayer and Andromeda multiplayer, one of our baselines has always been this feeling that we want to be generous towards our players. We never want you to regret spending money with us, and so our microtransaction plan was always to sell cosmetics. We never wanted to sell power. And so we developed a plan where we wanted these javelins to be ultra customizable and feel like as we rolled out into a live service that players would want different things to decorate their javelins with and make themselves stand out and be cool. Yeah, and that was their guiding principle, blah, 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 blah. So he goes as follows it up with, so loot boxes were never in the game. They were never in it. Well, I guess we'll never be able to tell now, are we? That's true, but no loot boxes were never part of our plan. And then he confronts him about actually Mass Effect 3 having loot boxes with power in them for the multiplayer component. And he... I guess I can look what he says. Yeah, it was 3. We used a metaphor of card packs for that. That is something that has been sort of a... I don't know. It's not loot boxes, it's card packs. But it's basically the same thing. When you open a card pack, there's an element of randomness in those, and we wanted to move away from that and be just like, oh, look, here's cosmetics, and you want to buy these cosmetics. Or if you want to earn them, you can earn everything in the game through just playing it. Or you can shortcut that and buy vanity items. So, yeah. So he's basically saying they didn't want to do what they did with Mass Effect 3. Which I kind of guess they did with Mass Effect Andromeda. Wasn't it? I think it was basically the same system in that multiplayer component where you could buy loot boxes with power.
Pretty much. It's I take slight issue with that part of the interview, I must admit, because he kind of just set the guy up saying the most scripted line ever.
Yeah.
And then to try and double back and say, well, actually, Mass Effect 3, we did have loot boxes and microtransactions, but it was all good humor and it was cosmetic. No, actually, no, it wasn't cosmetic, was it? Oh, scrap that. Okay, well, we had loot boxes, we had microtransactions, but it was all okay. And we're going to continue to do okay stuff.
Yeah,
trust me.
Yeah. I mean, that multiplayer component, it was only PvE, so I guess you could say that it doesn't hurt anyone if you buy power in that sense. But
you're paying money for in-game currency to unlock more items, which changes gameplay that's not cosmetic.
Yeah. So in that sense, it's basically pay to win. It's pay to win in the...
I really enjoyed Mass Effect 3's multiplayer. Absolutely loved it. Never paid a penny of microtransaction stuff, but that's just me. And as a result of which I still haven't got half the characters unlocked. But, are the Mass Effect 3 multiplayer servers even still running?
I'm guessing it is.
Not true.
But basically, Mass Effect Andromeda was the same thing. I actually enjoyed the Mass Effect 3 one more, because even though Mass Effect Andromeda was quite... one of the things that they have been sort of critically appraised for is the movement system and the combat in that game. And I feel like the added mobility sort of moved away from that. I really love the little bit more stale combat of Mass Effect 2 and 3. I didn't need the added mobility that we had in Mass Effect Andromeda. So
Yay, cover-based
But
shooting.
it felt good.
It felt good, yeah, it was good. But
I'm on the exact same point as you. I think the cover-based shooting was felt more fun, but the implementation, how they did it with Andromeda, was definitely, technically speaking, pretty good.
Yeah. But in the multiplayer aspect, that for me became something a little bit else just because of that added mobility, and it wasn't.
Yeah, I never played that multiplayer.
Yeah, if anyone out there still has Mass Effect 3 or wants to go back to Mass Effect 3 or Mass Effect Andromeda, those multiplayer components are actually quite fun. So, yeah.
But they're also unbalanced.
Yeah.
There's a character that basically wrecks everything.
Yeah.
No.
Well, yeah. But that's been a thing in both. Like they have these ultra rare secret characters that are usually quite more powerful than anything else.
Which character are you talking about, Patrick?
Gev Prime. Gev Prime destroys every one-hit KO the opponent can throw at you. So you can basically regen all your health without any downside.
No.
You can play as a Geth Prime in Mass Effect 3 multiplayer?
Yes. He has a shield-absorbing move which refills his own health, and he can't be one-hit. You can't be one-hit KO'd by something like an Atlas or a Cerberus Assassin or something like that. You're basically invincible.
It's been a long time since I've played that then.
Yeah.
I knew you could play as Geth, and my favourite character was the Vulture, but I didn't realise it was a Geth Prime. I really must have blocked that out of my memory.
Yeah. I usually always played like a Krogan, and I spec'd everything in melee, and I just ran around everywhere and just knocked everyone to pieces. You could
Warhammer Krogan.
Yeah, you could do so much damage. You could basically run into like what are the big mechs called for
Atlas.
the Atlases, and you could basically like two shot them on the easier difficulty. It was brilliant. If you had maxed out your melee capabilities.
Unfortunately, that character did fall down a bit at the higher difficulties because against the big dudes, you just got insta-killed.
It wasn't as effective. But if you just want to have a fun time just messing everybody up, that was really fun at the lower difficulties.
If I can just sort of jump back slightly, but it's one of my, you know how we were just talking about the whole thing with loot boxes, and then we roll back and it's a case of, well, yes, these practices are still a bit naff, but they're not as naff as that stuff. It seems that quite seriously to me seems to be like the modus operandi of the entire video game industry. Because I mean, it's like back in the day. Well, we had these awesome things called cheats in games that you unlocked with a code, or there was a special menu, and it changed the skins of your characters, children. It was amazing. You could do stuff like Big Head Mode, change the gameplay. Oh, that's DLC now. Well, that's interesting. Okay, well, and then so we now have bits and pieces that older gamers, myself included, we were used to getting on the disc and on the cartridge, so to speak. And it's like, for example, the advent of basically, well, we used to have expansion packs, then we had DLC. Well, we then went through a period where DLC, well, how tiny a piece of DLC can we make this to, before people start to complain about it? Oh, okay, we're going a bit far. Okay, well, we'll go back to slightly larger chunks of DLC. Well, what if we portioned out that game before we made it, and then we sold that as day one DLC? Oh, okay. Well, maybe we won't do it quite. Maybe we'll wait a couple of weeks. Oh, maybe we can make a season pass. And my point being is that they always take a few steps too far forward, and then they come back just a little bit. Oh, lesser two evils are okay, and then they go off in a slightly different direction again.
Yeah.
And I think fortunately this time around, perhaps with the loot box craze that kicked off, they perhaps have gone a bit too far to go back in that direction anytime soon. But as I was saying, just to mention Battlefield 5 briefly, because there was that excellent video that was done, a little while ago. I can't think who the geniuses were who made that. But one of the points, it was me and Sandra, that was made in there was, when I first heard about
you're so humble, man.
Oh no, thank you. I just can't bring myself to big myself up too much. Anyway, one of the things that when I first heard about the company soldiers mode, that worried me slightly. I'm like, okay, but they've not got loot boxes. How do they monetize? Well, they could bring back some sort of subscription service, perhaps. Don't think they're going to do that because they said it's going to be free. Well, what about character spaces? And then I've just heard today, do you need more space for more characters in your company of soldiers to bring into the maps, etc.? And then I heard today about the Division 2, and apparently for the most engaged players in the community, you'll be able to spend extra money to unlock more storage space in the game. And it's a case of, well, that loot is the core mechanic of your game, and you're actually going to make people pay to get more of it. GG. But I'm just a little bit concerned that's where we're going to be going with quite a few of these current iteration of looter games that are coming out lately, and that's a bit naff.
Yeah,
but if you're going to hoodwink like that, I prefer a subscription. I prefer the hoodwinking to be upfront. I'd like to see it coming. I don't want to have to be portioned out.
But I feel like everything is moving more and more towards subscription-based services. Now we see like the Games Pass for Xbox and the Premier thing with EA now, and they're all usually pretty good value as well. Like if you're an avid gamer and you game a lot and you game regularly, they probably save you quite a lot of money. I'm guessing that if you're more of a casual gamer, probably buying a game here and there is going to save you money. But yeah,
it's the sort of unstoppable change in the way that society is approaching these sorts of things. Nobody buys anything now.
Yeah.
As an item, as an ownership. You pay money now for the ease of doing something. I forget what the word's called. Convenience. That's the word. You pay money for convenience now. So it's like, everything. You don't buy phones, do you? You buy a monthly package and you pay that. You do the same with cars. Plenty of people are now no longer buying a house because it's so expensive. They'd rather just rent and have that as a monthly outgoing. You've got furniture, you've got electronics. It's moving into games. It's just this never-ending move towards it. Get to the point where you get paid, and then pretty much all of that money immediately gets siphoned off to pay for the things that enable you to live your life for the next month.
And ironically, you're paying more money that way ultimately than you are, if you had been able to have the capital to buy it up front, which is the bit that, it's curious. And I do wonder, all these subscription services coming out, more for the core gamers and for the casual, I do wonder if there'll come a saturation point where the companies are going to realize, well, we haven't actually got as many players and we haven't got as much revenue as we would like at this point, because there are only so many players going to have so many subscriptions. I'm just wondering if there's a point where it's a case of, well, I've got 6 subscriptions now. I really don't want another one, so okay, well, let's just shove these off into the corner somewhere. I don't know.
I actually had something very similar to that when I was reading the release of EA's Premier subscription that they've released recently. I was reading through it and I was looking at what it gives you, and I thought to myself, I'm currently not even sure I'm getting 40 quid a month's worth out of Xbox Live.
Yeah.
Why do I want to start spending more money on EA Premier when I've already got an outgoing for this, and then I've got everything from Steam and the Switch and all my other consoles and things? I don't need another one right now.
No.
And you say, oh well, Battlefield 5 is going to be on it and Anthem's going to be on it. I mean, okay, 2 games, that's what, 80 quid, 100 quid.
Yeah, where they get me, which is quite cheeky, is their early access things, where you get access earlier than anybody else. That is something that I'm quite silly about, and it matters to me. But
as a publisher, they reserve the right to be able to set their own release dates for the content that they produce. But I agree with you on when it gives you early access to a game, and then when the game comes out on full release and your progress in that game is not wiped.
Yeah, but that's basically the thing. You get access to all the betas, and you get even earlier access to the actual full game release and whatnot.
Yeah.
Like
Something special with
I shouldn't care about a couple of days, but I do.
Yeah, there's something special about being the pioneer or being one of the
Yeah,
pioneers of
yeah,
a new experience.
I always like being a pioneer. I always look for something where I can be the first and try to make that a thing. And yeah, so that's
It's
really
a new
speaks
shiny,
to me.
isn't it?
Yeah, it really
Yeah.
is.
There's another part that annoys me a bit. Normally, microtransactions or stuff like that is supposed to be money for the longevity of the game, maybe for more development and other costs that exist. But when you have a subscription fee, you already pay for the longevity of the games and of the company as a whole. If they still have microtransactions drin, it's just kind of being even more greedy than they already are.
Yeah.
Would you rather, Patrick, that they offered you different levels of subscription pricing depending on the content? So you could pay a higher subscription and you would get some of those, let's say for the sake of argument, it's cosmetic stuff. You pay a higher subscription and you get all the cosmetic stuff access to it. Or it
Either
releases
that
over time.
or no extra cost at all. That's not gonna happen. That's obvious. But I think your model is way more sensible than charging a lot of small things for a lot of things in general, and that adds most of the times up to way more than you actually would have paid.
Because that's the logical next step, isn't it? From having a subscription where you charge your players a monthly amount to access the games, is that you then break that down and you give them different tiers of access, and you bill it obviously as the fact that they, if they're not as heavy as as core gamers, if they're more casual gamers, they can pay less, and they don't have to pay out as much. When in reality, what's going to happen is almost everyone's going to go for the top tier, and you're going to get more money.
Yeah, they're probably gonna have multiple tiers. So one tier for the base game, one tier for including DLCs and everything that comes after, and another tier for all the cosmetics.
Yeah.
And I'm not even going to get into how crap I think season passes actually are. But anyway,
They are. They definitely are.
If we go into a subscription based model and that becomes the norm, do you think that this is going to mean the death of like an actual final proper death of physical media and thereby the collector's edition?
I feel like the collector's edition is already something that is becoming less and less of a thing. Like a lot of recent games have, at least the physical rewards for collector edition have sort of been removed away. They have the digital deluxe editions sort of now instead of that. At least that seems to be kind of a trend.
Do you think that the games lately, I say games loosely here, but do you think the collector's packs, which have not included the game, are steps to explore that very territory? So you can actually have the memorabilia and the merchandise. Oh, but the game's not included. You buy that separately online.
Yeah.
Because that's part of the subscription package.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. I don't like it, but it makes sense.
A little bit.
Yeah. I don't know. In some ways, it's convenient to have subscription access. In some ways, it's not. Like there's a lot of ups and downs with that thing, but I guess that's just only natural.
We could talk about this for hours. I
Yeah,
suspect Sarge has
yeah.
another point for us.
Yeah.
So about that interview, yeah.
Wait, can I throw just a quick one in?
Yeah, go for it,
sure.
mate.
Better Sonico just typed that he's been bothered by all the developers for Anthem leaving, even though he was hyped before. How do you guys feel about that? Does it impact your opinion on Anthem a lot, or just a tiny bit?
Not really, for me. Mainly because the majority of the development has already been completed.
Yeah.
And people leaving now is not going to influence the game a huge amount because they physically don't have the time to make wholesale changes to the game. Plus, as we discussed this a bit in the last podcast, I believe, Sarge, when you and me were talking, and we talked a fair bit about actually the fact is a lot of people have been leaving Bioware. and they are long-term staff members, long-term employees of Bioware, and they've sort of got to the point where they started Bioware when it was a small company, and it was a small group of people making games for the love of making games. It's now a massive company with EA over the top of it, thousands of employees, and it's a business, a big corporation business. It's a completely different ethos and a completely different way of doing your day-to-day work. That doesn't work for some people. They want to go back to doing the simple stuff.
Yeah, and that seems to be sort of a consensus among everyone who's left, that they want to work on things that they want to get more into the creative side of things. And since they're
the least corporate part of their, of all of their points of view, I think you're right. So sorry, I beg your pardon to interrupt there. Yeah, I think you're quite right.
Yeah. So it might only be natural, like one of them left and the other one starts to think like, yeah, maybe I should leave and do something else, and then another guy leaves, and then another guy leaves after that. I think it's just natural that stuff like that happens. But yeah, for me, it raises sort of a red flag, because that could potentially mean something. We don't know that until the game is actually released. But so far, what everybody has been said with when they have played the demo and whatnot, everything seems very positive so far. So we have no real indications towards this, that this is going to be like a huge.
Yeah, my only really tiny worry is just that they don't want to be associated anymore because of the Battlefield train wreck, because Battlefront train wreck.
I don't think
that's coming.
I don't think that is like, they're at Bioware. They're a company under EA, but they're not DICE. They're not the ones who developed.
Then you still have Mass Effect Andromeda.
Yeah, of course. So. That is probably going to leave some sour tastes or some bitter tastes in the people who work over at Bioware.
That's I think one of the biggest problems with Mass Effect Andromeda is it was BioWare's name on the tag. It was not the same BioWare. It was a different. It was a new BioWare studio.
Yeah, so. It was the first development of a new studio that hadn't done any real own developments before. So that's also part of it. But
I hope we eased his worries a bit.
Yeah.
There's no smoke without fire, but it's not entirely clear that this is smoke. So, I think that's probably
Yeah.
Could just be a morning haze.
There you go. It could be a bit of a light fog.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to continue a little bit with this interview. So he goes on and he talks a little bit about Andromeda, actually. I'm not going to pretend that I liked Andromeda in its entirety, but I did think that the movement system and the combat was very good, as we said before. And Mass Effect 3 had very good multiplayer. Was that also partially inspiration, that you looked at those games and wanted to try switching the focus from single player to multiplayer? And his answer goes as follows. I think that if you look at the evolution of our games, we've started fiddling with multiplayer really back with Neverwinter Nights. We allowed people to create modules, you could play it together, and then Mass Effect multiplayer and Dragon Age Inquisition multiplayer were kind of evolutions of that. And yeah, we did find that to be a very interesting experience, and we thought, it would be great if we could have a more social experience in a Bioware game, and it didn't have to be this little side mode. What if it was actually the game? And that was definitely part of it. And that's one part, and we can actually go and continue to the next question as well. The other question everyone asks about Anthem is how Bioware it is. And then he laughs. I understand that romance isn't part of the game. I don't want it to come across as one of those guys who marries in his DS or something, but Bioware can be a little bit Mills and Boone at times, but there was an earnestness and inclusiveness to the romantic subplots that you do better than anyone else. But playing the demo, I'm not sure I really took to any of the characters at first. So this explanation I kind of really like, and this is something that I wanted to hear before, this, which we haven't really gotten explained. With Anthem, we wanted to tell a story about a companionship of heroes, and we wanted to widen our audience out, so we wanted to tell character-based stories that were more like Knights of the Old Republic, where they were engaging characters and there's no romance, but you feel a bond and a connection. And I think when it comes down to the Biowareness of the game, it's being character-driven, with characters that you really want to get to know and a setting where you get to be the hero of your own story. Those are things that make a game Bioware. And, you know, whether there's sexual romance or whether there's companionship, I think it's down to the story and the media.
Giggity.
Can I just throw in a quick language question? What does mills and bones mean?
Yeah, I think that's... I didn't really get the reference either.
I don't even get that reference, so...
Damn.
Mills and... Bioware can be a little bit Mills and Boon at times.
Oh, Boon. Yeah, okay.
Mills and Boon. I don't really know.
Google it. I'm pretty sure it's
Oh,
two people.
Mills and Boon. It's romance fiction books and ebooks from Mills and Boon. So yes.
All right.
Oh, okay.
All right, that makes sense.
How would he know what Mills and Boon is?
But the thing about this, let's see. I guess we could actually first talk about the switch from single player to multiplayer. That they actually. That he was actually spot on here, which we hadn't really heard on before. Like, they kind of like what they had with their previous games when it came to multiplayer, and they wanted to focus more on that with this game, and that's where Anthem came to life. This is also something. This is something that they should have talked about before, making those comparisons to lower titles and why this is evolution from that. This is I kind of like this explanation. Makes sense for me. What do you guys think?
I think I agree.
Yeah. All right, cool, good. One thing that, I guess we can move over to the next one, and also the comparison to Knights of the Old Republic and the gameplay of that. The comparisons.
Let's be very clear, we're not talking about the MMO. I don't think, are we?
I don't think we're talking about the MMO.
That wasn't Knights
MMO.
of the Old Republic, was it? That was just the Old Republic.
Star Wars: The Old Republic, was it? Oh,
yeah. Knights of the Old Republic is the single player
excellent
experience.
RPG. I actually really enjoyed that.
Yeah. So it's nice that they're making this comparison, because now we know where they took inspiration from, how they wanted to build a single player aspect and the connection to characters in a more substantial way, which we hadn't really had before either. So, and yeah, I'm all aboard for like companionship of heroes rather than just like a sexual bond. I can dig that as well. Doesn't need to be. Doesn't need to be boning in my game. I mean,
I'd agree with that. I mean, there would, if you look at all of the characters in Mass Effect Andromeda, I didn't want to sleep with any of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, halfway through, I'm sorry, my face is tired.
My face is tired. Well, that's just killed the mood, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Off we go.
But that is one of the only places where, like, I never really get on the, like, that's so SJW, like, social justice warrior stuff. But with Mass Effect Andromeda, they really took in the critique of their characters being too beautiful, and they made them try to make them look more normal, but
like they stuff their face with marshmallows.
Yeah,
say, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Yeah, I like a part of the Mass Effect universe was always like there were these characters that were like really superhumans. Like one of the characters were really developed to be a superhuman, and she was really hot. I don't remember her name. Miranda? I think her name was Miranda.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Miranda Lawson.
Yeah, and she was actually developed to be a superhuman, so that makes sense that she was super hot. Like, that makes sense, but then you have these new characters that, like, if you're gonna have romance options, that is going to be a thing in your game, then you need to be able to feel some sort of attraction to those characters. That just bothered me.
Also, they had unusual looking people. For example, you could get into romance with Garrus.
Yeah.
He doesn't.
And I did.
He is not in our beauty standards, so what's the problem?
Poor Rex, though. I mean, he was just
That guy's beautiful. Don't say anything otherwise.
I mean, but if you look at all the characters in Mass Effect 1 to 3, they're really well crafted, though. Even though they're aliens, and even though they're characters that you shouldn't feel are good looking or are, let's not say maybe attractive, but like Garrix, for example, like as an example of his species. Not what I'm saying, but he was attractive in that sense.
God, I didn't know such. All right, yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
But if you compare him to,
You've really been getting into the lore, haven't you?
Yeah, but that's just something I feel like they
fan fiction.
Yeah, but okay. But I feel like that is something that they took in consideration with creating these characters. Like each and every one of them were sort of the best of the best of what that species could offer in terms of strength, in terms of looks, in terms of abilities, in terms of whatever. And that was really not taken into consideration with
Bet Rex had a massive dong.
Yeah.
But on the point of companionship, I think if you took the romance out of Mass Effect, for example, it doesn't really lose much. It loses a subplot, but the companionship is already great.
It's about. I mean, I know they're all aliens, but dare I say, it is about the humanity of the piece rather than the characters have motives, they have flaws, and there's something about them you can like. There's something about them you can relate to, even if they are an alien. They've got a past.
And if they get something as genuine as the Citadel DLC with in mind of companionship, I think that would be just as great.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do agree. Let's see if there's something.
I could talk for hours about some of the characters in the original Mass Effect, so I won't. I will stop now.
You clearly have a lot to say about Rex, so
Oh mate, he's all man, except for the bits that are reptilian.
We're just gonna be some Iron Man dudes hanging out.
Well, you could be hanging out with whoever you want, mate.
You just hang out with Rex.
Oh yeah, we'll all be hanging out. Everything.
Yeah, totally.
Everything.
Yeah. So I'm actually
conversation derailed.
Yeah, that wasn't actually in terms of what you said. I was actually trying to move the conversation further back to the interview. But yeah, they're talking a little bit more about the javelins. So I guess we could talk about this. The question goes as follows. I had two major concerns about the game at the moment, and that is first, that is the graphics are technically excellent. I do worry about the art direction, seems rather generic. In the demo missions, the big robot looked like the Hulkbuster, the little one looked like Iron Man, and the monsters looked like something out of Starship Troopers.
You see a problem with this? I don't. Carry on, sorry.
No, me neither.
Culture references.
And that's a little disconcerting for the debut look of the game. And he says, so I'm going to suggest, I'm not suggesting your artists are untalented, but you see where I'm coming from. And he answers as follows. No, I'm not taking it that way. I definitely see where you're coming from. I think the challenge as a creator when you're making something new, the challenge is to make it relatively individual. So yeah, we wanted to build a lot of it so that through your own personalization and player agency, you bring a lot of that individuality into the game. And we wanted to bring in a lot of stuff that, while being new and kind of interesting, at least had a sense of the familiar. So the narrow slice you took from these, take a look at, there is one aspect of it. I think that there's more variety in the game, and I think you will be pleased. So yeah, he asks, can you substantially change the look of the robots and whatnot and whatever? And yeah, we already know that is going to be a huge part of the game. Customization and personalization. So we have customization in the first part with actually getting new gear, new breastplates, new shoulder armor, new hand armor, new leg armor, new head armor, whatever for your different javelins, so that they will look different in a physical way. And then you have the personalization options with the color, the painting, whatnot, which makes the different javelins look personal in a totally different way. So I'm guessing that in the end, let's say a Colossus, which is the big javelin game, is going to look completely different from another Colossus, just because of the variety of the different customization and personalization options that are in the game.
Mine's going to be bright pink.
But Sarge, I don't think that's really what he meant. He later goes on to say something about Evangelion, and I think he meant if the personalization was that you kind of look like you are not, how should I phrase it? That your mech looks different than the game, if that makes sense. For example, they all look. I get that the interviewer said they look a bit generic. I'm on the same board. I like the look, but they do seem to be very basic in quotations in their look. And I think he meant something like if the normal mechs would look like Gundam suits or Transformers, for example, if you can change the look of your own javelin as much as look like a mech from Evangelion or something like that.
Oh yeah, I think that was your point, wasn't it, Sarge? Am I misreading?
Yeah, that was sort of my point. Like, you can change even armor pieces, which changes the geometry of the suit, which makes it look quite different from the base suit that you can have. So, if you want to try to customize your javelin towards something that is a little bit more to something in Evangelion, for example, I think that's quite possible. We're just gonna have to see if you need to change those parts out in order to get an upgrade, or maybe you can have something like the transmog system in World of Warcraft, where you can just take the appearances and then slap on some other stats on them. I don't know, but
yeah, because I believe it's more like an Iron Man thing, for example, with all his different suits. They all have the same idea, maybe even different geometry, like Hulkbuster to this, but they all have still the same design integrity.
Yeah,
and
I guess I know what you mean now. So no, there's probably not gonna be like a transformer aspect to them, where they change in that way. I think the base is going to be quite the same, but you probably gonna make them or be able to make them look widely different in the end.
They're going to have a similar silhouette.
Yeah,
you'll be able to vary how they look. You know, yours will look different to something else's. I think that's what we're trying to say, isn't it?
Yeah. So the Colossus is still going to be huge. The like the Storm is still going to be slim. The other javelins are what is called the Interceptor is still going to be slim, and the Ranger is still going to be somewhere in the middle. That is always going to be the case, but you're probably going to be able to make them look wildly different from the original.
Yeah, and
the sheer complexity that is required or is involved in enabling something like the Colossus to turn into something that looks more like the Ranger and vice versa is quite extreme.
It also doesn't really make sense with the if they would go that approach, because they already have said that they have weapons that are specific to the different javelins, and like if you make the Colossus look a lot more slim and let it lose a lot of weight, then it doesn't really make sense that it can use these huge, big, powerful weapons that it's supposed to be able to use. So
that was, by the way, not what I meant.
No, I get you. I get you.
Just to clear that up.
Yeah.
Can I play devil's advocate on some of this points quickly, with the point about the environment and the suits being generic?
Yeah.
Everything that I've seen from Anthem so far, you could probably say has been generic. There's been a HUD that's been familiar. The characters and the classes are relatively familiar. The environment, actually, whilst not hugely generic, could be classed as generic because it's not necessarily what you see when you look out the window, but it's very atypical of a sort of a fantasy setting. The combat that we've seen has been, whilst looking very polished, has not necessarily shouted out to me of doing anything that we haven't seen combats do before. And it branches out into the whole of the Anthem game being safe, being a safe play. Maybe a fantastic game, story with amazing convolution and everything, but it's safe.
But I get
all of those components sort of they slot into that, and so having characters that look generic or an environment that looks generic, actually it's doing what it's supposed to do.
They can branch out later, can't they?
Precisely. If they want to bring in DLCs, if they want to go absolutely nuts with a particular faction, they can do that. But what they're doing is they're putting down the basis of a game and a universe that allows them to do what they want later. But they're one which everyone can jump into and immediately know what it is they need to do.
Yeah, I agree, and I feel like when they to go back to the argument of this actually being developed before even Destiny and those games alike were even a thing. Back then, I feel like the concept and the art and all of that was a little bit more on the wild side than it is now, because now we have already gotten the taste of all of this stuff. We have all these Iron Man movies, we have Destiny, we have different games that are quite similar, so we're already familiar with the concepts they're trying to sell us here. So that, I feel, is also something that at least moves me towards the conclusions that it feels a little bit more safe. But yeah.
So the overriding point there being that I don't necessarily see a problem with that.
No. And the generic look of the javelins as base javelins, as the javelins that you have in the beginning, I feel like that is just a good framework to create your own customization and personalization from. So I'm not really worried about that.
I would like to have a skin where I can paint on a 3-piece suit onto the outside of my Colossus.
I would like a personalization skin where my Colossus looks like he's wearing a suit.
Yes.
The classic Colossus.
With a tie.
Yeah, a
Yes.
suit with a tie.
That'd be amazing.
Yes.
Or bow tie. And a dickies.
Yeah.
Oh, you just want the bow tie to go with your pink, your pink suit and your pink bow tie.
Oh, mate. I also want to have a massive hat with a great big peacock feather in it and a cane that's got a gold top, and I'm going to be
to the Colossus.
And all the other teammates that you have on your team need to look very slutty.
Yes, yes. I want to see the Interceptor wearing a bikini.
Oh, we need a monocle as well. Don't forget the monocle.
The monocle is important. All right, so there's more that we can take from this article. I guess not too much more. We've discovered or talked about the biggest pointers here. They go on and talk a little bit more about Star Wars, not that much, but a little bit about Star Wars and whatnot. So metro.co.uk and search for Anthem if you want to continue reading this article. It's getting hard for me to speak now after speaking for above an hour. It's my limit. It's my limit. But yeah, we're gonna move over to the last segment of the show before we go and say goodbye for today. And let's make it
Words, they are hard.
I can tell.
Thank you for tuning into the GO.live Gaming Podcast, everybody. That was Sarge.
And the last segment of the show, we talk about... In the last segment of the show, we talk about stuff that you can do until the next part or the next episode of the show goes live. Yes. Yes. All right, so, as I said, we're going to give you some suggestions. And I want to start with Mr. James. Do you have something for us?
Mr. James.
Mr.
James. Didn't get a chance to bring it up last week because it wasn't out. But for the Xbox fans amongst you, For Honor has been released on Xbox Gold. So if you do not have For Honor, you can download it for free. it is there. It is ready and available. So
have you played it some?
I have not played it on Xbox.
All right, but you played it before.
Yes.
All right, cool, good, interesting, nice.
And
Josh,
I had good fun doing it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what new and shiny things my magpie mind has been drawn to.
what
this
have you
week,
been
and-
doing since last time you were on the show?
Well,
Do you have
actually,
something
if
for
I'm
us?
going to be perfectly honest, Monster Hunter.
Yes, monster and hunting.
I might have jumped back into it, and it might consume my soul.
Have you played it on
Again.
PC?
Yeah, it's out on PC. It's actually out on PC. Now, that does come with a caveat.
Have you played it?
Which is that currently Steam has changed the way its friends list actually works, because now we have it where we can access the friends list online. So it's kind of changed the Steam Works, whatever it is. I'm using the wrong terminology, but it's changed the Steam API. Apparently, Capcom were informed of this. Capcom did not bother to change. They thought their in-game multiplayer system would be fantastic. It's broken. So until you can do some simple fixes to get around it, but what I would say is that currently Monster Hunter on the PC has garnered some mixed press, shall we say. Look at it, I urge you, once Capcom, and they are working on the patch, has fixed it. And I would say then that if you're on the PC and you've never played Monster Hunter before, it's a fantastic jumping on point, and I highly recommend it.
That actually sounds quite excellent, because I don't have the time or the money to jump into the game right now. So
it's an excellent time not to be able to play it. I agree, because it's a very funny game.
Because I really want to play the game, but it's nice to see that it has issues that it needs to solve before I'm going to be able to play it. So yeah.
Do you think that time will come? Are you sure about that?
I don't know.
We'll see. I might have to drag you on at some point. Just
Yeah.
because. But the other thing is that Deep Rock Galactic, which has been mentioned several times now, continues to be updated and is still excellent. So again, highly recommend investing some of your time into it if you have the people to play it with. Really, really good fun.
Excellent. Patrick, my man, do we have something for?
Yes, we have Netflix based or not based anime that's also on Netflix. Currently airing the second season. It's The Disastrous Life of Psyche K. Its picture on Netflix may scare you off because it's a boy with pink hair and weird things sticking out of his head, but just give it a try. It's about a guy who's a psychic and apparently the only psychic in the world. And he just wants to live a normal life. He has powers like reading minds, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, and stuff like that, but he tries to refrain from using it unless it's necessary. And it's kind of like in one episode there are 3 short stories, but they have a narrative that's driven throughout the whole series. And I didn't think that this concept would interest me or even entertain me, but it's a really good comedic show. It has a lot of characters into it. It's written like with a sitcom place in mind. So they made the characters and the jokes are funny because the characters have chemistry. And I can definitely recommend it for a casual watch. So you can turn it on every time without really losing the narrative when you are maybe taking some time off the anime.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. All right, so what I've been doing instead of Monster Hunter World is I've been playing World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth. And I can actually really recommend it. It's they've done a lot of quality of life improvements of the game. If you want to get into it and you haven't really been that big of a World of Warcraft player before, you do not even need to buy the base game anymore. All you need is a subscription of the game, which is about $15. I think if you're going to use US dollars for some reason. I think that is about where the monthly subscription fee is. If you want to sub for more months at a time, it's going to be cheaper for each month. That's usually where it goes. So you only need a subscription and you need the latest expansion in order to get into Battle for Azeroth. And while you get Battle for Azeroth, you actually get a boost to 110, which was the last expansion's level cap, so that you get started at where the new expansion actually starts. So you don't have to play from level 1 to level 120, because that is going to take a lot of time. A lot of time. And if you're new to the game, that old content can be off-putting, because it's still not all of it has been revamped or reworked or polished and whatnot, and it can look quite old. But this new expansion looks amazing. It's a wondrous feat what they can do with that old engine and actually make it look as good as it actually is. And me being a World of Warcraft lore nerd, this game is it's amazing for me in that sense as well. It's a really heavy focus on story and lore this time around, which they really haven't had before. Before they were more mechanic focused. But
that's interesting, Saj. Yeah, because one of my big problems with World of Warcraft has always been that I've really enjoyed the lore, which has actually been quite dark and gritty, and then it's not presented in game, and it's this happy, fun time cartoon world.
Yeah, and I can say that it's a lot of dark and gritty in this one. Right, so okay. Yeah, that might be something for you as well. So if you ever wanted to try out World of Warcraft, this is an excellent time. It doesn't cost you nearly as much as it did before to catch up. And you also have the boost that you get with the expansion, so that you can start with new content directly. There's a lot of different videos out there if you want to catch up on the main story points before this expansion, like the main characters and the main events that are affecting the current part of the world. Like one thing, if you knew anything about the last expansion, Legion, you know that this expansion has some parts where, like we talked about the suspension of disbelief before, it's a little bit weird, because in the last expansion, they were fighting basically alien demons on another planet, and they had spaceships that shoot big lasers and whatnot, and they could teleport and all of that stuff. And,
sounds like medieval fantasy.
Yeah, for some reason, suddenly those technologies and all of that isn't available anymore. Suddenly they just don't exist, so everybody has to do it an old-fashioned way. Which is, I mean, they're just doing it because it makes more sense for the story and what they want to tell, but it's still, like, if you play the last expansion, it's a little bit weird.
Do I still have my tenderly faced goat people?
Depends on who the tenderly faced. Yeah.
Okay, that's all right then.
You do have those. You even have a new version of those called Light Forged Draenei. So
oh my, okay.
They're even more goody two shoes than the race were before. So
that is a bit disgustingly goody two shoes, actually. That's a bit much, probably. Yeah.
Me being a horde.
That's party policeman. That is.
Yeah, me being a horde player. There's a lot of
dead Draenei.
Oh, I must admit, my main was a troll. My main was a troll. I just want to throw that out there. So it's fine.
Yeah, and they're introducing more.
Doesn't beat a Tauren.
Yeah, they're introducing more races now. They're gonna go introduce Sandalari trolls, which are upright trolls, which look really beefy, and
really
also, yeah, basically. But they're also going to introduce the original orc races that were on the original orc planet before they were tainted. So no green orcs, the brown orcs. Yeah, exactly.
I always thought they were red.
No, not in World of Warcraft.
Yeah, they are red orcs.
Well, they're brown.
No, there are actual red orcs if they got tainted by demon blood after they got infected by Fel.
Wow, you just got outlaw nerd.
Well,
it's Warcraft 3. I don't know if it's in World of Warcraft itself.
Well, that's true. In Burning Crusade, also there were red orcs. You got me
there. That's because Garrosh Hellscream was one of the red orcs. Anyway,
just lost that.
Can I just finish this by saying that Brownie48 has just chimed in on the Twitch chat and said, "It don't make sense going to heaven with the goody-goodies." I'm assuming he means Lightforged Draenei, and I agree. If you're going to heaven with the party police, is it really heaven?
True.
Philosophical question there.
On a last note, I like what they're doing with the light, which has always been the good force. Now it's a little bit more questionable. They're moving towards a little bit more questionable if it's really a good force or not. Just
Light
say
is comprised of all colors, after all.
yes, yes. All right.
Wow.
I know, right?
On that sentence, that is where we're going to leave you for this time around. You can probably make a broadery or whatever it's called when you make those, like you have a quote on the wall with like whatever.
Yeah.
With what Josh said.
A quote of the day. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So. Thank you. Let's see here. I can't forget saying that if you want to contact us or leave a question that we can talk about on the show or whatever, then leave us an email at feedback@gunsofanthem.com. Also, if you missed the show and want to see it again when it's not live, then the VOD will be up on the YouTube channel after this, and the audio version will be up this Saturday on all podcast platforms that you can think of. So iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, your podcast app of choice, whatever. It's going to be there. Probably. If you're not using something really weird, then it's probably not going to be there. But yeah, so thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.